This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, today I've got a special guest on the podcast. His name is Bill Rapier. So Bill is a United States Navy veteran. He served 20 years in the United States Navy SEALs. And the last 14 years of his service to this country were spent with Naval Special Warfare Development Group, otherwise known as DEVGRU. And during his career, he spent time as an assaulter, breacher, sniper, team leader, troop chief, military working dog department senior enlisted advisor. This guy did just about everything. And even after retirement, he didn't want to just stop doing that type of stuff. He launched a firearms training company called Amtac, Tactical Shooting Instruction, or Amtac for short. And Amtac courses, they cover combative pistol and carbine and also integration of other weapons like blades and things like that. And I actually missed out on going to a class. He was going to be doing it here in my own neck of the woods here in Oklahoma City, but I missed out because, you know, we had the birth of Squish and we had a lot of stuff that we needed to do around that time. So I wasn't able to peel off and do that, but I will be doing that in the future. But these classes are very well regarded, very highly reviewed. And obviously you're getting, teaching from one of the greatest, the greatest trained type of a warrior in this type of a setting. So it's very hard pressed for you to be able to find training that would be better for you than something like that. But I want to go ahead and give a shout out to Chris Flimmer. That's a listener of this podcast. He actually got me and Bill together because I wanted to have Bill on the show for a long time. And one of the reasons I wanted to have Bill on the show is because, yes, I talk to people that are veterans. I talk to people that are active duty military. I've talked to a lot of SEALs on this show, but he's a very unique guy because not only did he make it all the way to the development group, which is the top tier of the Navy SEALs, he's also a guy that is a incredibly, incredibly devout Christian. So what you'll notice about this interview today is, I've kind of got my own way of doing things, and I kind of like to kind of put things together and, okay, let's talk about your early childhood and let's go here. But probably for the first hour, because this is a couple hours long, guys, it's a great one. You should listen to every last bit of it. But we went on a tangent where I just kind of followed the thread. I was like, okay, we started talking about, when his Navy SEAL career kind of, ran headfirst into his belief as a Christian. And what it was like, when he was killing people, because that's what he was doing. That's why I named this podcast what I did, because it's a unique thing to kill people at the behest of a government, but also to be an incredibly, incredibly devout Christian. But those things aren't as opposed as what you might think. So we get into a lot of that. We get into, Calvinism and Reformed Baptist theology. We get into, denominational fights. We talked about Christian worship music. We talked about a lot of things, Christian manhood, rites of passage. And we mainly talked about rites of passage at the very, very end of the podcast. But we did get into some of the missions that he did while he was in the Navy SEALs, why he decided to get out, why he decided to, create Amtac and go those different routes. Guys, this was a great conversation. And this is an example of, to any of you guys that do podcasts out there, that if you've got time with somebody, just let it ride. If they're an interesting person like Bill is, just kind of let it ride and ask questions. Be curious. Don't just, stick to the rigid structure. Guys, if you could see my notes, the questions we didn't go over, there were so many things that we wanted to talk about that I wanted to make sure we talked about that we didn't, which probably sets us up for another conversation later on down the road. But guys, I don't want to keep them from you any longer. So without further ado, let's get into it. Bill Rapier, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
So I got to be honest with you. I've been wanting to have you on the show for quite a long time. And it was actually a listener of the show, I think I mentioned in the intro, Chris Flimmer, that kind of got us together to make sure that this could happen, because you have a very, very unique story. And a lot of the ways that you think about things is different. And, I get a lot of hate from guys like, why do you only have Navy SEALs on your show? I'm like, they're the only ones that write books. But it is kind of funny about that, because you don't have, a book out there for everybody. But just to kind of give people a little bit of an introduction to who you are, we'll get into the military stuff. We'll expand out into a lot of topics today. But just describe your upbringing, because that has really kind of led you into some of the decisions you made in your life and kind of how you conduct yourself and your family. So what was it like growing up, Bill Rapier?
So my folks were missionaries, actually still are. So I moved to Germany when I was 5 years old. I got thrown into a German kindergarten at age 5.5 or 6. I was the only English speaker there. No one spoke, some of the other people spoke English, but I was the only native English speaker in my school at the time. And very quickly, my folks had studied German for years before going to the missions field. And within a couple months of being completely immersed in it, I think I was speaking better German than they were.
Okay.
So we lived two different spots in Germany. We lived down in Bavaria in Speyer. little town right on the Rhine. And then we lived up in Langhagen, up by Hanover in northern Germany. Lived there until I was maybe 12 or so. And then we moved to the States for about 6 months. So lived in San Jose area for about 6 months or so. And then we moved to Swaziland in southern Africa. So Swaziland's a tiny little, it's a kingdom. At the time, it was the youngest monarch that was in charge of the thing. The country is surrounded 3/4 by South Africa and 1/4 by Mozambique. I absolutely loved living in Africa. It was a great time. Loved the people over there. It was just a very cool, it's a cool place. So we only lived there for about 2 years or so. And then my dad got recalled to help back stateside. So we moved to Colorado Springs, and that's where I ended up finishing up high school. So I did the last 3 years of high school in Colorado Springs, and then joined the service immediately, literally the day after graduating from high school.
Yeah, so we'll get a whole lot more into your service, but overall, like growing up, because everybody knows a preacher's kid, right? And so, but growing up a missionary's kid is a little bit more unique. And so, for you, how having grown up as a missionary and spending all this time outside of the United States, kind of framed how you think about the world or think about the United States in particular, but also how it affects how you run your family now.
So, worldview wise, it definitely, living overseas and specifically living in more of an expat type community overseas is they used to say about the British that lived in the colonies that they were more British than the British were. And I totally, from what I've seen, that's the case, because all the ones that wanted adventure and wanted rugged individualism, they moved on. I mean, as is evidenced by our nation as well. So in a sense, living overseas really established that American identity within me, because I recognized that, oh man, here's all this, German stuff going on or African stuff going on. And I remember coming to a point one time when I was in Germany still, where I was thinking in German. All my friends were German. I was speaking German, even at home with my parents. I was speaking German most of the time. And I realized, well, I did the math, and I'm like, man, I've lived in Germany longer than I have in America. And it really bothered me, because I was like, I'm an American. And so I remember making a conscious decision at that point that I'm going to start thinking in English. I'm going to try and speak English at home more. And really, so I mean, another example of that would be watching the Super Bowl in Swaziland at 2:00 in the morning. That's,
yeah.
I mean, now I really I don't ever watch football. I really don't ever watch any organized sports. I didn't even understand the rules of football at the time when we were going and watching the Super Bowl, but it was a cultural, hey, the crazy Americans get up at 1:00 in the morning and they drive to their friend's house, and, they eat junk food and watch the Super Bowl. And, so just having that, that community of being American. I mean, another cool example, living in Swaziland, as an American, I could ride my bike to the ambassador's house and basically just say hi to the gate guard and then go in and use his pool and just swim, go and swim laps. And it's like, it was a really cool, like, I'm an American, and like there's certain, privileges that come with that and certain responsibilities that come with that. And so it was very much, living overseas definitely gave me a lot of that identity of my American identity that I have today.
No, that's an important thing, Bill, because with traveling, I encourage people to travel all the time, but even within the United States, like I live in central Oklahoma, but if you travel up to Minnesota, things are going to feel different and sound different if you travel all over the US. And it's certainly true as you go across the globe. And so my wife and I have been, fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to do quite a bit of international travel. We haven't lived other places, but it does kind of give you a wider perspective. But for you mentioned this already. So you graduate from high school and you're going to the military. And you seemingly knew that was the next step. This wasn't like, well, I don't have anything else to do, so I'm either going to work at that gas station, go to college, or go to the military. It seemed like you knew you were going to go that direction. So what drew you to the United States military? And then specifically, what drew you to the Navy? And then even before, further than that, what drew you to the Navy SEALs?
So really, this is how God made me. This is really the only, I mean, it's cool watching my children now, and like they have certain bents or directions in life, and some of it can be encouraged, but some of it is they just have their own personalities. They have their own desires, their own things that they enjoy and want to, are interested and want to pursue. So that's what I had with the military. I mean, from age 5 or 6, I think I have pictures of me with my dad's old military stuff on, holding an old inert single barrel shotgun. Beard painted onto my face. It was very much, this is what I wanted to do. Then living in Germany, especially during the Cold War, I mean, when we were up north, we were only a few hours away from the Iron Curtain. So there was there was definitely the appreciation of, the Soviets could be rolling through here at any point. And then we did have, we didn't spend a whole lot of time with American soldiers, but from time to time we would meet and hang out with American soldiers, and we could go on base. Everyone, like people would help us get on base, and, maybe use the commissary. And like, that was always a kind of a cool thing. But man, I remember running around, it'd be miserable weather outside, and I'd have all my German army stuff on, or, mixed match of German and American stuff on. It'd be pouring down rain. I'd go knock on the neighbor kid's door and be like, does your son want to come out and do Überlebungstraining, which was like survival training? We're going to go out into the woods and make shelters and cook food and whatnot. And, so very early on, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So my dad then said, well, if you want to be in the military, you should go to West Point. And so for a long time, that was my goal, was to go to West Point. And then when we moved to the States, so prior to moving to the States, I was doing good in school. And then we moved to the States, and for the first year, I was doing good in school. And then my junior year, I started wrestling and kind of started coming off the rails a little bit, started partying a little bit. And by the time I was the latter half of my senior year, I wanted nothing to do with going to school, still wanted to join the military. And so that's when I really started researching and going, what is going to be the hardest organization to get into that has the highest likelihood of seeing action? Because this is, we're in between wars. This is the early 90s as I'm researching this stuff. So we haven't been in a real war in, really since Vietnam.
Right.
So I'm looking at it. I'm doing all the research. I'm reading about, Marine Corps reconnaissance. I'm reading about SF, and I'm reading about SEAL teams. And yeah, I was telling this to a guy the other day, like the Marine Corps guy could have got me, because I went in there first, because I really didn't want to join the Navy. Just the whole, recognizing that most guys don't make it through training. And I really did not want to be on a ship. So I went into the Marine Corps recruiters. I was talking to him. I was asking him about force recon and compared to BUDS and what's the difficulty. And he looks at me, he goes, man, those 5 mile soft sand runs, those aren't even good for you. And I walked out. I'm like, I want to go do the hard stuff. So ended up, joined the Navy, did the delayed enlistment program. So I was actually signed up prior to graduating from high school, graduated high school, and joined, shipped out the following day. Went to Great Lakes, went to boot camp up there. And then, thus started my career in the Navy.
Right. So for you, because it seemed like you're a guy that's kind of drawn to action. You mentioned it there. You're drawn towards doing hard things. I've heard people say this before, because again, I told you off air, we're not going to sit here and talk about BUDS. Yes, you were cold, wet, sandy. It was hard. We get it.
Yep.
But some people get to Coronado and they're not sure if they're going to make it. They're just going to kind of feel their way through it. And then almost 100% of the time they end up in the part of the class that doesn't continue, right? Like they're the people that ring the bell and set their helmet on the ground. Did you show up knowing you were going to get through? Like, no. Hey, these guys aren't going to kill me. They have to feed me. Like, what was your mindset when you showed up?
I wasn't sure I was going to make it through. I mean, that's the bottom line. I wasn't sure I was going to make it through. I mean, I was, take it one day at a time. All right, let's just get through this one day. I mean, there was many times I was going through, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Like just quoting that, reviewing that verse over and over again when I was really cold and I really didn't want to do it. but, did keep going.
It's an incredible thing because that's the thing I try to tell people a lot of times because, I'll lead people through workouts and it's like, I have an idea of how many reps we're going to do, but they don't. And that's what makes it worse is because
For sure.
you're going to be doing things physically, but you don't know when you're going to stop. And I've heard people talk about this before, like during Hell Week, whenever the sun's going down and all the instructors are like, oh, we're going to kill you guys the moment the sun goes down. And it's the anticipation of what's going to happen that week that'll get a guy, to ring the bell, which is just kind of interesting. But you've mentioned it here a couple of times. So I think we should go ahead and get into this at some point. And I don't know at what point, so maybe you can answer that. At what point did your chosen profession, of being a Navy SEAL, run into your Christian worldview? And I mean, we'll get into missions and we'll get into all the stuff that you did as a Navy SEAL because you did some really, really interesting stuff. And I'm going to force you to not be so damn humble. But at what point did the fact that you believe in, the resurrection of Jesus Christ run into the fact that your chosen profession is probably going to require you to kill people?
So first off, when going through buds and I feel like it's only been recently that I've gotten a little bit more clarity or maybe just more perspective on this. But I really think now as I was going through buds, making it into the SEAL teams was probably an idol for me. I probably valued it too highly as I was going through training. Also was not living for the Lord at the time. It wasn't until a couple of years of being in the SEAL teams that I was driving back from Colorado one night. I'd visited some friends out there. Driving back, I'm driving through the desert someplace, and I'm just looking at the stars, just kind of contemplating life. And I remember thinking to myself, man, doctrinally I don't believe that you can lose your salvation. If you are the elect, you cannot lose your salvation. But I was looking at my life. I'm like, no one else could tell. If you looked at my life right now, no one else could tell that I'm a Christian. And so I really started praying and asking God to give me a desire to want to follow after him. And that, looking back on it now, that was really a turning point in my life where, I got plugged into a church, started going to Bible study, started actually reading my Bible and going, wow, this, it was like it was speaking to me for the first time, man, this is actually how I'm supposed to live my life. Instead of just being a set of rules, it's like, okay, this is kind of stuff that I'm supposed to do or have to do. It was like I was becoming hungry for God's word. So going back to did it have any effect on how do I reconcile the two with potentially having to kill people? I mean, going through our interview process to go to DEVGRU, that was one of the questions that was asked of me, right? So I'm sitting there, I've done the PT test, I've done this long battery of psych tests, and now I'm sitting in a horseshoe of in the middle of a horseshoe of tables, and it's all these senior operators and then a couple admin people and the doctor, a psychologist, a bunch of these people are sitting around, and the psychologist goes, "Oh, you say that you're a really religious guy, but you're trying to get to a command where you may be asked to kill people. How does that square up with the set of rules? One of them says, 'Thou shalt not kill.'" And my answer to him was, well, number one, actually, it wasn't quite this deep at the time, but I'll elaborate on it now. The ancient Hebrews had different words for killing, just like we have different words for killing as far as manslaughter and different degrees of manslaughter. David was a man after God's own heart, and he killed so many people that they wrote songs about him, right? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. So I told him, I don't think God is going to have a problem with me doing the same thing, right? There's a massive difference between murdering someone and killing them in battle. Right? Murdering, the violence itself in a fallen world, the violence itself is neutral, right? You can use violence. If someone is torturing your family to death and you come in and use violence to stop that from happening, that would be a righteous use of violence. If you want your neighbor's wife or his car or whatever, and you go in and kill them in order to take that would be an immoral, unrighteous use of violence right there. So the violence itself is just, it is a tool, and it's part of living in a fallen world is that is something that we have to be able to do.
So when you get into the Navy, again, we're just kind of fast forwarding through buds and all that. So you're in the Navy now, and we'll get into DEVGRU here in a minute as well. So you are here at a time where we're at war now, right? So we had, years where we weren't at war, but now we're at war. And so you are being sent overseas to go defend this country, but also to execute missions, which would, result in the death of people that are on the other side of the gun from you. And so that is something that you did do. You did kill people while you were over there. I am curious, and I know you've talked about this before, so if anyone thinks that this question is unfair, you've answered it before, so I'm going to ask it as well. After the first person that you killed, were you still as sure of your positioning? Because everybody understands like the difference between murder and killing and manslaughter and accidental death and all these different things. But now the blood is almost literally on your hands, right? And this is someone that was trying to kill you. This is an evil person. This is somebody that believes a worldview that is outside of what jives with the Judeo-Christian ethic or what we in the United States say is a moral way of operating around the world. Did you feel the same way? Did you have the same conviction after that first life you took?
Yeah, there's no change. Uh, in fact, as I've been retired from the Navy now for 8 years, teaching, or almost 8 years, teaching full time since then. So I, as part of my mindset talk, I talk about killing, and every time I do a 2-day class, that's one of the things that is going to get talked about. And looking back on it now, I think I was probably too nonchalant about it. I mean, it was because it was never growing up, it was never a thing that, killing in battle is bad. It was that was never, it was the lines were very clear. There's murder and there's killing in battle. And so now as I am speaking, I guess somewhat from a position of authority where I know that the guys that come and train with me are listening to what I'm saying. I've really felt convicted of, hey, I better make sure I get this right. Because honestly, there was times where it was like, let's just put it too nonchalant about it. Just, like high fives, good job shooting that guy. Like, no big deal. And as I look at it biblically now, I'm like, well, it is a big deal. It's not that it's bad, but it is a big deal. The taking of human life, the shedding of blood is a big deal. So now I would just say, hey, we should probably be a little bit more somber about that, because I mean, David was a man after God's own heart, but David did not build the temple because he had so much blood on his hands, right? His son built the temple for him. So there is so I've changed, I've changed my mindset a little bit there. Not, I have no regrets of any of the shootings that I've been in. But looking back on it now, I would be maybe a little bit more somber about it, I think.
I think that makes sense. When you said nonchalant, it was like no one assumed that y'all are just hooting and hollering, but it's kind of the same thing. This is obviously a little bit of a bastardization from your main point, but like when people watch hunting shows and, they're watching a 30-minute hunting show and then they see these people hooting and hollering when they shoot a big elk or a deer or something like that, people don't understand how you could be so happy about, an animal losing its life, but they don't show the years of training or all the stuff they had to go through to get that. And it's that to a crazy degree higher when you're taking the life of an enemy combatant, I would assume. Obviously, I don't know for myself, but one thing I am curious about, because, you mentioned there that there was that high fiving, like, yeah, I smoked that guy, like that type of a mindset. And I think people can generally understand that. Did your teammates, knowing your worldview, because I'm going out a limb here and saying that all your SEAL brothers weren't maybe coming from the same Christian worldview as you, but did it ever cause any issues? Did it lead you to some interesting conversations? Because let's say there's an atheist or an agnostic that was right next to you when you took a life. Did that, allow you to have a conversation later where you could share the gospel with that person? Did they ask you, hey man, you're a Christian, how could you be next to me killing people? Did that ever come up?
Not really. I mean, the questions about faith came up all the time, but it was never. Yeah, guys knew where I stood when it came to like getting after it. So there was not a question on that.
Okay, so how did you deal with the questions about your faith? Because that's going to come up with it's just as general as like, hey, where'd you grow up, or what sports did you play in school? It's like, hey, what's your worldview? Like origin, meaning, morality, destiny. Where did we come from? Why are we here? How do we tell between good and evil? And where do you go when you die? I'm sure those things came up. How did you handle those conversations with your brothers?
I try and share the gospel with people, but I mean, ultimately, there's people have their own opinions on things, and I firmly believe that you cannot come to saving faith unless the Holy Spirit's working on is drawing you to that understanding. And so yeah, I have to do my part and share the gospel, right? We're commanded to do that. But then after that, it is not, and we should be wise. We should have an answer, for the faith that we believe in. But also it's not, I don't have to convince people. I mean, I'm going to try and do my best, but I recognize now that it's not on me. Like, I'm not going to convince someone to come to saving faith. That is only, I might be, God might be using me as part of his instrument, for that person's coming to saving faith, but it's not me. Like it's only through the Holy Spirit. And so I think understanding that takes a huge weight off your shoulder. Um, and then I guess this kind of came to mind, like, some of the regrets that I do have is thinking about guys that I served with that did die, that I'm like, man, I don't think I ever shared the gospel with this guy. Like, cause there are guys out there that I can think of that I was, maybe running around drinking beers with, not being a good witness for Christ, and they're dead now. And like that, if I, talk about regret, like that's a regret in my, as I look back on things.
Right. Well, let's dig into that to a little bit further, because I'm getting the sense that you kind of come from the Calvinist tradition or
Yeah,
Reformed tradition. Is that kind of a fair assessment of where you would plant your flag?
for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that, and again, I've talked about this on the show, and I've talked about with other people. Those are still things that I'm kind of working through and trying to understand different systematic theologies. Obviously, understanding that for hundreds and hundreds of years, people were Christians before John Calvin even existed. But at the same time, I'm curious as to why you felt that guilt over. I don't even know if you use the word guilt, but that guilt about not sharing with your brothers, about the love of Christ, about sharing the gospel with them before they passed away. Because to a degree, it's like, if you look at the elect status, which you
Yes.
talked about earlier, whether or not you're elect, if you look at that in black and white terms, it's like they were either elect or they weren't. So one thing that I've asked a lot of people in the Calvinist sphere, and some people are like, very, very basic kid Calvinists, and people are like, other people died in the wool. It's like, why would you feel this overwhelming sense to go and be evangelical, to go and actually share in these tremendous ways? Because to a certain degree, it's like they're either elect or they're not. The Holy Spirit, God either chose them or they're not. And so I know that, people, there are Calvinists screaming right now at their speakers, like, no, you don't understand. But it's like, I feel like it's the systematic theology has gotten so complicated that people are struggling to answer in one sentence, how can I be saved? So just kind of walk me through that a little bit.
So first off, you don't have to believe in election. You don't have to believe in free. All right, we can come to saving faith regardless. I don't think anyone understands election when they're first getting saved. Just because most people are not have not dug that deep before coming to saving faith. The reason why we should be sharing the gospel is because we're commanded to. Like, and the opposite of that, as my understanding, would be hyper Calvinism, and like, that's wrong. If you go, well, you're either saved or not, like, and I'm just not going to share the gospel because you're either elect or you're not. That is, you're deciding to ignore God's word if you take that approach. And so when I first started learning, free will versus election, and that whole, the two schools of thought within, Protestantism, I asked my dad, and my dad gave me the answer. He says, you should share the gospel like you're a free will guy, and you should believe that God is sovereign like you're a Calvinist. And at the time I thought it was a cop out. Like I was expecting something, my dad's got his doctorate, and I was expecting something really, really deep. And the older I get now, the more I'm like, that is how we're supposed to be living. Right. And I do firmly believe that we are that God has chosen us from the beginning of time, from before the foundation of the earth, before there even was time. How that works out with God loving all of us and not wanting any to perish, like, I don't know. But if I understood every aspect of God, I would say that would be a lot lower level of God. And we serve a mighty, mighty God. Like, I don't believe that I am going to be able to comprehend everything about him. And I'm okay with that. And I think in part I'm okay with that just because, being a military guy, there's need to know. Like, there's some stuff that it's just, hey, this is your level, and this is what you're read into. And like, I get it. There's a bigger picture. And so when I say regret, like, yeah, that's actually the whole election has been a comfort for me in looking back at those, because I can look at it logically and go, you know what, even if I was unfaithful to God by not sharing the gospel with them, if that person was elect, God was someone else was going to do that. So it has been very, very comforting to me to have that. But where I say I have regret is just, man, that's like, God allows us to be a part of his redemptive plan for humanity. I mean, like, what an amazing, my life will probably be over in the next 40 years. I'm 45 right now. If I make it another 40 years, right, that'll be a long time. But, eternity, and man, I get to be a part of that. I get to be a part of God's redemptive plan for humanity for all time. And what a blessing. And so I just look at it as that was probably missing out on blessing by not sharing the gospel with those guys. I mean, and they were friends. So
you don't feel like this over. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you going into that level of detail, because like, I think that's a very, very interesting point that your dad made about, evangelize like it's free will, but like, just rest in election. I think that's an important thing. And I'm sure a lot of people would quibble with the right theology of that and all these different things, which I guess is and guys, we'll get back to the military stuff, but I'm really enjoying this vein that we're in. I'm curious for a guy like you that believes the way that you do, planting your flag in the Reformed, Calvinist field, is how do you study the Bible? Because like literally right here next to me, I've got, a Bible with no commentary. I've got two different commentary Bibles, right? So they got the scripture up top and commentary on the bottom, and then two just straight up commentaries, one John MacArthur, the other by Moody. And so I've got a plethora of ways to do this. And I've got several, apps here on my computer, and I've got several websites where I can access the scripture. But there are times when I feel like if I'm just reading the Bible with just the verses there, that, I might be missing something. Well, what could John MacArthur teach me about that? Or what does my Reformation Bible say about that? What does my ESV Bible say about that? And if I'm being honest, Bill, sometimes that causes me to be paralyzed a little bit, to where it's like, if I'm just reading the scripture by itself, I'm wondering if I'm reading it stupidly. I'm wondering if I'm reading it wrongly. And this is a me problem. This isn't, but I'm assuming there are other people listening to this, Bill, that struggle that same way, because there's no such thing, I guess, as technically reading the Bible. It's always studying the Bible. And most guys don't have enough time, they say, to work out or to eat right or to spend time with their kids or all that. And so they just put into that category Bible study, because who has time to study? I'm not in school anymore. I don't have hours set aside for study. So I guess walk me through how you specifically study the Bible. Do you come at it through a theological lens every time? Do you read John Calvin's opinion or Charles Spurgeon's opinion or these guys' opinion about everything? Just kind of take me through that.
No, so I guess first off, I would say I'm still pretty young in on my reading list right now is London Baptist Confession, number 2, 1689. Like, okay. I'm working through that right now. So there, and part of that is, just as I look back, very, very blessed to have very godly parents, and and to be raised in the faith, but doctrine wasn't something that we got into a whole lot. So now being in leadership in church, I'm like, man, I've got to like I need to know a lot of this. Like, where do I stand on so many of these different positions? And I really I'm seeing I'm really hungry right now to learn more on, hey, well, what exactly do I believe? Why do I believe it? Because if we're not truly grounded in, well, I believe this, this, and this, because it says this, this, and this in the Bible, then it's it's easy to start veering off course and going down some of the roads of, the various cults that are out there, because they're not taking God's word as a whole. They're not, they're too surface level, right? I mean, this is fascinating to me. Like I've always said, oh yeah, I'm more non-denominational. That's kind of growing up. I was always like, yeah, I'm non-denominational, right? Went to a Lutheran church in Germany, went to a Baptist church in Africa, went to more non-denominational churches in Colorado. And now that I'm reading through stuff, I'm like, actually, Baptist doctrine is probably about where that's where I line up the most, not necessarily dispensational, modern dispensationalism, not there, eschatologically. But, as I look at Baptist doctrine, I think for the most part, I think that most closely aligns with what I believe. And in the past, I may have been too quick to go, well, let's not worry about the things that divide us, which I still would agree with, right? We shouldn't break fellowship over, you believe in sprinkling babies and I believe in, in free will, or not free will, but in making
full immersion and all that.
Full immersion. Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't break fellowship with someone over that, but that is as I read the Bible, I'm like, no, I think it's pretty clear. I do see where the Presbyterians are coming from with sprinkling babies. Like, I see it. I disagree with it, but I wouldn't break fellowship with someone over that. Same thing with, if you're a hymns only kind of guy, I love the hymns. In fact, we do probably 2/3 of the songs that we do at our church are hymns. They're just done in a little bit more modern style, with guitar lead, vice a piano lead. But we'll throw a little bit more modern song in there from time to time. And then some of the, that's another whole tangent right there with hymns. Well, man, if you look at in Luther's time, right, he wanted to bring praise and worship back into the church. And so he was taking bar songs, drinking songs, and putting gospel lyrics, Christian lyrics to those songs. I was just reading a commentary on that. He would say that sometimes the song was so deeply embedded with drinking culture or with the bar scene that he said that he had to give that one back to the devil. And I just think that's fascinating, because there's a school of thought now that's like, man, if it's not in a hymnal from, 50 years ago, it's horrible. But man, there's so many good songs now that if you didn't grow up with the hymns, you would look at that and go, this is absolutely a hymn. So having doctrinally sound worship music, I think is very important. Sorry, we kind of went down some rabbit holes there.
No. Like you opened up two cans of worms, and guys, like I'll set it up in the intro where, guys can kind of figure it all out. But I do want to get back to music in a second, but I want to talk about something else that you brought up there. So talking about denominations, talking about doctrines, I think one of the easiest things for a non-Christian that lives outside the church world to point to as a reason why they wouldn't want to be any part of that is because of the sheer number of denominations. Like, I live in Oklahoma, the belt buckle of the Bible Belt. And so on one street, you can have every denomination you can possibly think of within a few hundred yards of one another as you continue to make your way down the street. And it could be like, how could we go from the first century church to where we are today? How could in 2,000 years we've created this? And the thing about it is Satan is incredibly crafty and creating schism and problems. I mean, you said breaking fellowship with your brothers. We do it all the time, Bill. It's like, oh, you don't believe in full immersion. Oh, you don't believe in once saved, always saved. Oh, you don't believe in, like, I know people that have, like my wife and I broke up in college because the tradition she grew up in, they believe if you're not baptized, you can't go to heaven. And I was like, wait a minute. So if I get saved and we're on our way to the church to go dunk me in water, or we're on the way to the bathtub to dunk me in water, and I have a heart attack and die, that I'm not going to make it to heaven. Like, we have these squabbles over mostly things that are not foundational or cornerstone issues to the Christian faith.
I would put that one
into it.
I would put that one in that is you're not saved by baptism. Like, if we're going to argue about dunking or sprinkling, like
right.
That's a separate thing right there. I mean, if you just look at the guy that died next to Christ on the cross, he was not baptized.
Exactly. Right. No, and that was my number one argument is they didn't take him down, like, take the nails out. All right, dunk, and then put him back up and say, you can die now. Like I'm totally with you on that. But there are people that are vehement, right? And these are well-meaning, God-fearing, gospel-centered people. They are vehement about pick an issue out of the plethora of issues. That's got to be Satan, like that working us, because we're not presenting ourselves as a unified front. You know what I mean?
Yes. There is It really is a two-edged sword, because there is, like, I don't want to break fellowship with people over, minor doctrinal issues that are not salvation-based issues. But at the same time, if we're not going to stand on stuff, then we end up just going, well, it's kind of whatever you believe is true, which is not true. Right? There is truth. There's only one interpretation for the gospel. So there are some hills that we need to die on. I just think what we need to do is go, okay, these are, grace alone, faith alone, Christ alone, the Trinity. Those are some of the things that we say, hey, if you're outside of this, you're not a Christian. If you're inside of that, then you're a Christian, but you believe that we shouldn't use instruments during worship. Okay, check. Like, you can believe that. That's fine. Like, if I go worship at your church, I won't bring my guitar. That is okay, but that is not a salvation. I would say that's a style-based thing, and I know some of the people are very well-meaning with that, and they might say, hey, this is like, here's the biblical case for this. All right, that's fine. You can believe that, but it is not, whether we use instruments or not, whether we sing hymns or a little bit more modern songs, that does not determine where you spend eternity, right? What determines that is, whether you have made Christ Lord of your life, you've repented, you are following after him. That is what determines where you spend eternity.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement there. Let's go ahead and get back to the music thing, because I've talked about music quite a bit on this podcast. It's been kind of a through point for me that I cannot stand the overwhelming majority of contemporary Christian music. Now, to be fair, I'm a metalhead. Like, that's always been the music that I've been into. And so when I was introduced to like Living Sacrifice and the Zao and Striper, like, and all that, like whenever I was just going to church on my own, that always agreed with my palate way more than anything that is kind of being sung today. But I did a podcast a while back. I think it was episode, I can't remember what episode it was, but it was contemporary Christian music is for women and effeminate men. And one of the main through points of that is a lot of these songs, the lyrical content is very homoerotic. They're written either by women or effeminate men. The overwhelming majority of Christian music is consumed by women. It's marketed to women. It's for women. And a lot of guys, like, if you don't have that depth of kind of personal understanding, you'll be sitting there at church looking up at these words on the screen and being like, okay, I don't know if I want to sing, I want to embrace this man into my arms and to bring him close to my bosom and to nuzzle into his grace. For whatever reason, that seems weird to me. But most guys, maybe they have to separate a little bit. And that's not to say that, I'm painting with a broad brush here just so we can get to the point of my question. But I do find that as a major sticking point for men specifically, is they go to church. This music isn't like any other music. There's not a genre of music that sounds like church music aside from church music, right? It's hard for them to get into. And then they're surrounded by a bunch of guys that are pretty soft, pretty doughy, depending on the church that you're at. And it's like, man, is this where I need to be? But a lot of it can kind of come back to music. And so I'm with you. If you're into the Psalms and singing old school hymns, freaking go for it. Like if you're into singing, the new school Hillsong or Bethel songs where it's the bridge 47 times and the chorus 82 times, great. That like whatever you're into. But that does cause a lot of issues for men. I mean, am I crazy? Because a lot of guys emailed me after that episode. They're like, yes, I never knew what it was until you described it. But yes, I have the same feeling.
Yeah, well, I think to some extent there's and I think this is something we need to teach towards, is there's a feeling, and I know I was solidly in this camp for many, many years of, I'm like having too much identity in, I'm a man and I'm in the military, and is it like, do men sing? Like, do men play? And like thinking about those things
Yeah.
more as kind of a feminine things. And I'm trying to teach the opposite of that now. I mean, David sang and danced before the Lord, right? He was a man's man. When we're doing, when we're worshiping God, we're doing adoration, we're praising, and we're trying to give glory to our Creator. Like, there's nothing effeminate about that. I think we should be encouraging guys that, hey, you should. Right, you should be able to pour your heart out. Now, in what fashion you do that, yeah, there is a lot of this. I mean, you even just look at like the chords that most modern stuff is done in. It's a much higher pitch, because it is sung by a lot more women, or feminine guys, and so I think there is look at a lot of youth leaders now as well. Like they're trying to be hipsters, and so there's so I think we need to teach towards that and say, look, no, this is like, let's reclaim this. Let's reclaim this area and teach the men that, hey, it's okay. I don't care how you sound. It doesn't matter. But you're like, when we're praising God and worshiping God, we're giving Him glory. This is the person that knew us from before there was time, and knows every hair on our head. And so we're saying, God, thank you. Thank you for all the things that you've done for us, and we're praising Him when we're doing worship like that. So a key thing that kind of I would stand on worship wise is, I think the songs need to be doctrinally sound. Like, I don't the I am a friend of God, He calls me friend contemporary music song. Like, I cringe, even though like I know in the Bible it says that, but I feel like we're leaning too much on friend Jesus, and not, yes, he does call us friend. However, He's also our sovereign creator. Like, there's a level of just, wow, like this is not like, hey, we're buddies, friend, which which I feel like that song in particular conveys. So I'm just looking. I pulled up our worship list for this past Sunday, and we have "Thy Mercy, My God," which is a hymn. "Yet Not I, But Christ in Me," which is a newer song, but very, I would say, hymn-like. "Before the Throne of God Above," another one that's very hymn-like. "He Will Hold Me Fast" is a hymn. "On Christ the Solid Rock I Stand," and then "Christ the Sure and Steady Anchor." So very like doctrinally sound. And I think it's important, because especially as we're teaching people, the songs get stuck in your head, right? The stuff that you're listening to, it ends up being on repeat. You're doing whatever you're doing throughout the day. And so it's either, back in my country music days, yeah, I'm driving my truck to the bonfire, and like you can either listen to that, have that going through your head all the time, which, I mean, it's interesting looking, when I hear country music now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's really no better than, lyrically, it's no better than rap music. It's just like the country, it's like more my culture flavor of rap music. But the lyrics are just as bad. It's just as much about consuming large quantities of alcohol and hooking up with girls. It's the same thing. So it's like, what do I want to be meditating on throughout the day? And it says we're supposed to pray without ceasing, right? And so if I'm thinking, the lyrics of "Yet Not I, But Christ in Me," like that's that's something that that's what I want to be meditating on. So when I am, if I start to get upset about something or anxious about something, it's like, man, no, it's not me. It's Christ in me. And because he paid the penalty, I can overcome this now.
But one thing about that, Bill, that I feel like is really important to say as well is contemporary Christian music as a genre is not the only genre of Christian music. Like
Yes.
I really, really like Christian metal. Now there are people that, I mean, I've gotten 1-star ratings on this podcast because people think the intro outro music to this show is satanic because it's loud, gravelly, screaming vocals. But they don't understand that the guy that is doing those vocals is a very devout, biblically based Christian. And so it's like same thing. If you're into hip hop, there is Christian music out there for you. If you're into bluegrass, there is Christian music out there for you. So I think that's a very important thing for people to remember. And like, guys, if you could see behind the curtain right now and look at my notes, you'd be like, Kyle, you are all over the place right now, but you're taking me on all these really, really fun roads, but we will get back to some of the other stuff. One thing I was going to ask you at the end that I'll just ask you now, because we're already talking about it, Christianity and manhood in general. So you already talked about how, you kind of had this inner dissonance about being a man versus being a Christian and all those different things. But Bill, that's the reason why Undaunted.Life is here. Like our mission is equipping men to push back darkness. But the whole reason why I started this was because I felt like there were men that were missing out on Christ, men that were missing out on what the church could provide to them and what they could provide to the church because they walked in and they realized, man, I feel like I got to check my testicles at the door when I walk in here. That here's where all the godly men are, but all the manly men are out doing other things. They're on the range, they're at the gym, they're in the garage, they're doing something else. And I feel like that's a major, major issue. I feel like most modern churches put off this vibe. Some of it is subtle, but a lot of it's very overt. Like, look, this isn't for you. When we make sermons, we have the women in mind and the children in mind. When we pick what songs we're going to sing, we have the women and children in mind. And then the churches are shocked when 80% of their volunteers are women. Whenever the men, they just can't get them excited about whatever it is, about the latest, food drive or the latest, fundraiser or the latest whatever. And once a year, they do a men's event where they serve chili and have a guest speaker, and then they call it good. They're worried about men's programming and not about discipling men, not about making their church man friendly. So for you, you might have a little bit of an interesting perspective because you grew up with seemingly a very discipleship focused father. Your parents were missionaries. Perhaps the churches you've gone to are man centric and man friendly. But what are your overall thoughts about how the modern church is getting wrong their ideas about how they can go after the hearts of men?
I think for one, if you're coming at it from the perspective of, hey, I'm doing worship for women and kids, or I'm going to do a sermon for women and kids, like I'd say that's probably not very biblical. I mean, just looking at, I think you should be coming at it from the, hey, we need to present the gospel, right? That we need to, what is worshipful, like that's what we need to be doing, not trying to cater to one particular group or another. I mean, I think with some of the children's church stuff or youth church, like I think that catering has caused disasters within Christianity because you have these because people are trying to cater specifically to one demographic instead of just saying, hey, you know what, let's come together and let's worship and study God's word as a family. Obviously there's the younger kids. I'm good with I'm not extreme on that position. We have a younger kid Sunday school, but we don't have a youth church service concurrent to the normal church service, because I think there's an age where the kids get it and they need to start learning. It's the gospel is being presented. And I think sometimes people think, oh, the kids can't pick up on this gospel, but it's, like we have to somehow water it down or dumb it down for them. But then there's a lot of stuff. It's God's word. Right. And so I think you can't approach any ministry from hey, I'm only trying to reach this segment or that segment. Now, I think as men, we've done a horrible job of just shirking responsibility, right? If you're a Christian, if you're a Christ follower, number one, that means that should be the primary identity of your life, right? Everything else should be after that.
Yeah.
Husband, father, whatever you do for work, like all those other things should follow. I am a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ. And so if you just getting guys to change that and to go, man, to stop looking at yourself as, I am an electrician. And that's where I take my main identity. Stop doing that. Or even like good things. Like, I mean, not that being an electrician is not a good thing, but like even husband or father, like those are great things. But being a Christ follower is so much more important. We have to have our primary identity rooted in that. And then as soon as we do that, then we go, well, man, I'm spending all this time doing other things. And would I be better off spending more time following after Christ? Like one of the things I was really convicted on was just Paul talks about, physical fitness is of some, or physical training is of some value, but spiritual training is of immense value. I'm paraphrasing that a little bit. I was super convicted. I was like, man, how often do I sit down and read the Bible for an hour and a half? And the answer is very, very rare. Like, unless I have to preach, or not have to preach, unless
Right.
I am privileged to bring God's word to people, and therefore have to sit down here and really get after it for a while. Like, it happens very, very rarely. How often do I go out and run for an hour, hour and a half? At least once a week. Like, I'll go just go out and run for that long. So I used to listen to techno music or, an audiobook or something like that, generally like something with a beat, because I'll run faster if I do that. And then I started getting convicted about it. I'm like, well, what can I do? Well, for the last couple of years, I've been listening to most of the time MacArthur sermons while I'm running. And I've been so hugely blessed by that. Like just an incredible level of blessing just by going, okay, God, I'm going to, instead of getting the few extra calories and running just a little bit faster, I'm going, I want to put you first in this area and try and continue to, increase the depth of my faith while I'm on a run. And so now with that, I think we need to, first off, as men, we need to recognize, hey, this is not some effeminate thing, right? Meekness is not.
Yeah.
Meekness is power under control, right? Giant war horses were considered to be meek, right? That would kick you and cave your face in or bite your cheek off. Like, that horse was considered to be a meek horse if it was trained properly, because it would respond to its rider. So we should be power under control. We should have that. So we need to take back and get involved, whether it's, hey, get up there and, dust off the guitar and get up and help do worship, or Sunday school. Like, you don't need a heavy depth of theology to be able, to share the gospel with children, right? The material is there for you. Like, but overwhelmingly, Sunday school classes are taught by women. And it's like, so that's part of where this whole problem comes from is when you're a kid, it's my, auntie so-and-so is teaching this, or, but then as the kids hit the teenage years, especially as the young men hit the teenage years, they need that man to be able to go, hey, knock it off. Like, you're not on the right. Like, that's not cool that you're out, smoking cigarettes or, drinking, or like, that's not cool. Like, it's like, those kids need a man that will stand up and for the gospel and say, hey, this is really what we're supposed to be doing. So I don't know. It's something I've kind of felt convicted about lately, is just, we should be more, as men, we should be more involved, and we should be encouraging each other to be more involved. Like, that, that's nice that you're coming to church, but like, let's get in the fight, like, if you're a follower of Christ, this should be the most important thing for you. So if you're segmenting and going, well, I do Christian stuff Sunday mornings from 10 to noon, and then the rest of my life, I just do whatever. And like, maybe I'll say a prayer every once in a while. Like, man, is to some extent, and this is people won't like hearing this, but like, are you really saved? Like, I mean, and that would be another, I guess, thing that I've really been hitting on lately is, when I was raised, I remember being in the backseat of a car before we left. So I was probably 5 years old before we left to go to Germany. And I remember asking one of my friends next to me, "Hey, are you going to heaven?" And then I said, "I'm going to go to heaven." And then I prayed the sinner's prayer. And, Lord, please forgive me my sins, come into my life. And for a long time, I believe that, hey, if you do that and you're sincere about that, like, you're good forever. And now the analogy that I like to draw is, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 20 some years now. So you get a brand new guy, he wants to roll. He's like, "Oh, that looks pretty cool." So he buys himself a gi, goes to the gym, rolls, and it just has this amazing experience doing jiu-jitsu. Comes home that night, wadded up gi goes in the corner. Next morning or next evening, it's time to train. He looks over, he's like, "Oh shoot, my gi's like a nasty, moldy, sweaty mess right there. Like, I'll wash it tonight. I'll roll tomorrow." The next day rolls around. He's like, "Man, I just have this deep muscle soreness. Like, I'll roll tomorrow." This continues for the next 5 years. Is that guy a jiu-jitsu guy, or did he have an emotional experience doing jiu-jitsu one time? Right? As a guy that trains, I'm like, "No, you're not a jiu-jitsu dude. Like, you're just, yeah, you trained one time. Like, that's nice." You're not. But
Right.
guys will try and apply that to their faith. They'll say, "Oh yeah, I said some words and then nothing in my life changed." And so I'm very much of the belief now that this is, when you say those words, you're making God Lord of your life, right? It's not just, I say some words and now I'm forgiven. And God, and I don't want people to get the wrong thing and go that, hey, I'm espousing a works-based righteousness, which I am not, or works-based salvation, which I'm definitely not. But what I am saying is that if you are a Christian, there will be fruit in your life. There will be, like, right? I mean,
Well, Bill, let me actually hop in on that.
A good tree bears good fruit, a bad tree bears bad fruit. And not to say that sometimes as a believer you're not going to bear some bad fruit, but there should be a pattern of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control, like all those things. If you are a follower of Christ, if you truly have made him Lord of your life, then that is the direction that your life is going. Go ahead.
No, well, so I see where you're going with that. And there's a lot of stuff in there that I want to refer to, but let's just focus in on that last thing, because I've been listening to a lot of John MacArthur here recently as well. So every time I lift or do anything that's really difficult, I usually have podcasts going. So yeah. I almost don't listen to music anymore. So here I was talking about music for forever. I almost don't listen to it. I listen to it about 5% of the time I'm listening to something. But I got to tell you, since I've been listening to MacArthur, there are certain moments in my life where I feel very, very encouraged and very in awe of some of the things that he says and does and his scriptural references. But it does feel a little worksy to me, because it's that same thing you talked about, to where it's like, we're not seeing enough fruit to think that little prayer, and he says it all the time, it's like, to think that you could just pray a little prayer and then be saved is just crazy. I'm saying it in a real terrible way compared to the way he says it. But that does feel like works has to be this huge part of it. And I think about the 7-year-old that doesn't have a lot of bad habits, right? It's not like they need to turn away from looking at porn or turn away from smoking weed or turn away from all these things. Their life the day after they become a Christian will probably look very similar to the day before, when they were playing sports or watching cartoons or just being a kid, right? And so it opens up this can of worms for me, which gets back to the thing we were talking about earlier, which is, how in the world do we know if we're saved or not? Because as soon as I started listening to MacArthur stuff and started reading, Calvinist theology, there have been times I've never felt less saved, like, because of the things that I'm reading and learning, which is a hard thing for me to say out loud and a hard thing for me to admit, because now I'm sitting here thinking like, oh my gosh, I just stood up at a Baptist church when I was in 10th grade and I raised my hand and I walked down to the front and I prayed a prayer. Did I do it right? because like I started reading the Bible and I started doing some different things, but I was a good kid. I didn't have this crazy life that I needed to turn away from. So I got to be honest with you, man, that is terrifying to me because you get into the scripture about there will be those that say, Lord, Lord, and they will not enter
Yeah.
his kingdom, right? They're going to show you their spiritual resume. They're going to run down their Vita of all the Christian stuff that they did, and they're not going to get into heaven. But it's sermons like that and it's ideologies like that I'm like, oh no, am I different enough? Which leads me to I'm not doing enough works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. At what point, so I look back for myself, was I saved at 5 years old, or was it at 20 or 21 years old? Like when I came to that, man, like I'm not, like, God, give me a desire to follow after you. Like where was that? Ultimately, I believe that, I was never a goat. I was either a lost sheep or a found sheep, right? Goats don't turn into sheep, right? Um, the fact that you are questioning this and going, man, God, I'm not, like, I need to do more. Like, I'm not seeing enough fruit in my life, I would say is one of the proofs of the fact that you are saved, because the more we follow after God, the more we see the depravity of our own hearts. And the more we see, oh man, like I fall short in so many different areas. Whereas if you're very surface level Christian, like you don't see that. And the more you dig into God's word, you're just like, wow, and thank you, God, for dying on the cross, because I'm screwing this up still. Um, so I think that is one of the ways that we do see that, and it is, we do have to be careful to never never put our faith in whatever works that we're doing. The works have to be an outpouring of God. Thank you for doing, for making a way for me to be right with you, and in response to that, I want to serve you. I want to do these things for you, and yeah, I'm going to work at those things because they're not, following after Christ is not easy, right? That the way is narrow, right? uh, it is a hard path, and especially as a man, right? There's so many things that are, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self. Like a lot of those things, like you don't think of love and joy, you don't think that as manly virtues. We're really
Sure.
like they are some of the most manly virtues. I mean, our Savior was, the best example of a man that we have, perfect man, and he loved us so much that he bore our burden, right? Took the penalty that you and I should pay but never could pay. He took it on himself, right? And he did that because he loved us so much. So love is it's a huge manly virtue. If we take it outside of faith, right? Just the love that you have for your family, and that's what allows you to go and fight and die for your family, to go, yeah, okay, I'm going to lose. Like, we're going to lose here today. And I'm good with that because my family is either will survive because of this or has a higher likelihood of surviving. So I think in part we need to reclaim some of that and just say, hey, these are manly virtues to do this. And those virtues, though, they're flowing out of the love that Christ has for us, right? The transformed lives that we now have, those works come out of that. Those works do not save us. If we're counting on those works to save us, we're lost, right? If it's Christ and anything else, you might as well just throw Christ out and only have the law. If it's the finished work on the cross plus something else, right? So our faith has to be wholly in the finished work on the cross, and then out of that comes, man, hey, I like, sorry, God, I screwed this up again. Like, help me to do better this next time. Help me to love those people more. Help me to spend more time. Help me to do like sins of omission. Like, hey, forgive me for not being involved in my church and stepping up and like being that guy. Like, forgive me for not doing that because I should be doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate you going into all that detail. And the way I set up that question, some of you guys might be thinking, oh my gosh, Kyle's having a crisis of faith. I certainly would not say that. But there are those times where you have those, those mountains and valleys in your life, or
For
those ebbs
sure.
and
Yeah.
flows to where it's like, okay, you're kind of questioning things, but it's kind of like how I described to one of our mutual buddies, Mike Ritland. I look at Mike Ritland as a skeptic, not a cynic, right? So a skeptic, so I'm looking at my own Christian life skeptically. So a skeptic is like, I need to see some more evidence of that. I'm not exactly sure I believe that. Can you explain that again? That's how a skeptic approaches something. Whereas a cynic is like, yeah, if you gave me a million reasons, I'd need 1,000,001, whether they
Yeah.
would say that or not. And so I feel like I'm almost like internally kind of like navel gazing and being very skeptical about kind of where I'm at. So like, no, guys, I don't need you to come over to my house and cover me in prayer. Like, no,
Intervention.
I'm not about to, I'm not about to have this big intervention. I'm not about to light anything on fire. We're going to be good to go. But I really appreciate us kind of going down. I feel like we went through like a 45-minute rabbit trail through a bunch of awesome stuff. So I'm really, really glad that we discussed that, because I do want to come back to your military career now, because even just the stuff we've discussed for the last hour will kind of inform some of those things. But you get into the United States military, you go towards the Navy, you go towards the SEALs, you make it into the SEALs. But I believe it was about 5-6 years into your career, you actually became a member of a group called Naval Special Warfare Development Group, or DEVGRU, or there are other names for that as well. But that is the elite of the elite inside an already elite spec ops community, right? And so I guess the thing I'm curious, because I know several guys that were in DEVGRU, and they all kind of had their own unique experiences and went on unique missions and things like that. But you served, I think it was 14 years in development group. And again, that is the tippy top of the top tier of the United States military. So I guess what kind of led you towards that? Because there are a lot of people that, work a 20-year career in the SEALs, but never go through the screening, never tried to go through Green Team or any of those types of things, or perhaps are never invited, but you were, and you did. So how did you kind of first learn about DEVGRU, and what kind of took you that direction? And then we'll just kind of span out from there.
So I really didn't have a clue when I first joined the Navy about DEVGRU. I wanted to join the SEAL teams, got to SEAL Team 3, and then had started hearing whispers of this mystical place on the East Coast. And so start asking questions. And at first, as a new guy, like as soon as I started hearing stories, I'm like, this is what I want to do. But being a new guy, you can't even say that. You just have to focus on being a good new guy, just being a good platoon guy. But yeah, as soon as I started hearing stories about it, I'm like, that's what I want to do. I mean, I remember working out and just thinking about, like extra reps. Yeah. Like thinking about doing that. That's what I want to do. So I screened to go there after my first deployment. We talked a little bit about the interview process for that. So screened, got picked up, and then left very shortly after. I mean, so some guys have great experiences in the SEAL teams, and I had actually really wanted to go to SEAL Team 2, which did, I've skied my whole life. I love skiing. I love snowmobiling. It's part of the reason I live up in North Idaho now. Almost native German speaker. I wanted to go to SEAL Team 2 really, really badly. But I ended up going to the desert. But it's all part of God's plan. Like, I think in part, I probably would have enjoyed that too much. Whereas, we deployed to the Middle East twice during non-war times, and it was miserable. And I couldn't leave there fast enough to go out to DEVGRU. So I showed up there in 2000, went through our selection training, or at the time it was called Green Team, went through that program. And then, got into a squadron and got to do some really cool stuff.
So I know you're kind of passing over that because you're a really, really humble guy, but and I'm just going to make it awkward. I'm just going to force you into saying some really cool things. So for a generalized civilian populace, they don't know the difference between a Green Beret and a SEAL. Right? Like they just really don't get it. They don't know exactly which branches they're in, or kind of how they serve, and what's Delta Force. Like, what is that kind of the same thing? That they don't know. But even people that do know a little bit, maybe they've read some war memoirs or watched some documentaries or YouTube videos, they don't even know the difference between development group and between just a normal SEAL team. I don't want to say just a regular SEAL team, like these aren't, spectacular
Yeah.
people, but there are some fundamental differences between what it is, a guy that's on SEAL Team 2 versus development group. So give us a little bit more insight as opposed to having to go through another level of selection and, close quarters battle, being more scrutinized or, needing to be a better shot or being in extra good shape or all that. What are the main differences between those groups?
It ends up just coming down to mission. The missions are different. I can't get into too much of that because it's still like not supposed to talk about that stuff. So that the mission is different, but also like you end up. So the guys that will even try to go to the command, like you have to have a minimum of two deployments at your normal SEAL teams, and then there's going to be then there's a selection process, and then there's a peer review, a peer assessment, which ends up being a phenomenal tool because now you look at it and you go, oh yeah, this guy's trying to come. Like I just did 2 years ago, I did a deployment with this guy. So you've hung out with this dude for 2 years, day in and day out. And so you could say, yeah, this guy's a good worker. Like he's heads up, like he's a good guy. He'll be an asset. Or no, this guy's lazy. Like we don't like this guy. Like, no, thumbs down. And so like that peer review ends up being a really, really good tool right there. But then some of the other real benefits that so then you have guys that are good, good shooters, they're in shape. Mm-hmm. And then they go through another selection process where you're going to can 40 to 50% of the guys that were already they're already good SEALs. But they just don't quite have what it takes to make it at the command. Maybe they're not learning something fast enough, or, they're not shooting hard enough, or whatever it is. So we're starting with a really good group of guys, and then we're canning some of those guys that are solid, good dudes. And then I think one of the real benefits is at a normal SEAL team, right? You come together as a platoon or as a task unit, and you do a big workup together. And then at the end of 2 years, it disbands, and then you start over again with all fresh leadership. And at the command, you don't have that. You have a different structure, and those guys will stay within that organization for a long time. So you have much better organizational knowledge. So now if you get you get a new officer in, he's like, oh, I think we should do this. You can look at him and go, well, sir, we tried that 8 years ago, and this is what happened. And so no, we're not going to do that, sir. And I don't mean to be disrespectful towards officers. We had some phenomenal officers, but I mean that is kind of that happened quite frequently, where there would be guys that are there for a shorter period of time that have a great idea, but hey, your predecessor 3 people removed from you had that same great idea, but that makes for a much better organization, is the fact that the guys are together for longer. So now and then multiply that with now combat tours where we're going down range, and I remember the first hits that we did were the classic, helo raid, landing on the X. So landing close to the target, running up giant explosive breaches, landing in rice paddies. I mean, all this stuff that that's what we had trained to do for years. And then we started looking at it and go, man, none of this it's really not working, right? We're trying to catch these guys and they're running away. And so then we started finding sneakier ways to get in, and maybe where there was more walking involved, and where we're gonna land further away and we're gonna walk in, or maybe take vehicles someplace, or just come out with different ways of doing it. And if you don't have that organizational knowledge, then it's just, oh yeah, we have this deployment, and then the next time we deploy, it's all new people, and we're just going to go back to whatever the doctrine said to do, and we're going to do that, and we're going to have the same results. Whereas by having the same group of people, with little changes, or slow changes within the organizational structure, you end up with a collective memory. So that you can go, oh yeah, I remember 5 years ago we worked in the same area, and this was a sporty area. Like they want to fight in this area, so maybe let's change this part of our tactic, or maybe let's plus up a little bit, or maybe let's make sure we only do this during, let's make sure that we have a lot of air assets stacked. Maybe if we say, hey, our min force is this number of air assets to support us, maybe we're going to go into this bad area now that we know is a bad area, and so we're gonna ask to double that level of air support. So there's all these things, and what that does is it just leads you to win the fight more effectively, right? We talk about as I teach guys to fight now, it is way better if you just win than if you have to counter and then win. Right? If I have to do any kind of counter, like it's good. Like you should, if you're into this, you should know how to do counters. But way better is that I just win. I just, whether it's pulling a pistol out, blade, smashing with elbow, like whatever it is, like it's better for me if I just send it and win than if you do some stuff first and I counter, and then win. And so the more, having that collective organizational knowledge and then being able to look at a target set and go, okay, now let's make sure that we go in with enough guys, right? Let's not put 4 dudes on a mountaintop in Konar, and that some of that stuff was, if with a little bit more organizational knowledge, would not have happened. Some of the disasters that have happened.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. Obviously, looking back, you can look and see all of the issues that have come, and there's been a lot of books and movies made about some of those issues that came up from poor mission planning. And I know there's a lot of mission stuff that you can't specifically talk about, but I know you have talked about missions before that left kind of an indelible impact on you. And I have some in mind, but I don't really want to influence and say which one you should share. But it would be remiss of me to not ask you share about something that did happen while you were on mission, whether it was when you were in DEVGRU or without. So let the Holy Spirit lead you. Whatever story you want to share, you go for it.
So I remember one where it was a kind of particular sporty target. I think it was at least a 10K offset. So we were walking for at least 10 clicks to get into the target. Knew that the enemy knew we were in the area, but they didn't know exactly where we were. It was a pretty good route, if I can say so. I was a recce team leader at the time, so it was our team's job to make sure that we had a good route to get in where we would remain stealthy the whole time, and just got in there relatively uncontested. Like we knew that like the Taliban knew that we were somewhere in there, but they didn't know exactly where we were. And then once we hit the target, then they knew. And so it got to a point where we were taking fire from 3 different cardinal directions. AC 130, we're shooting 105s, close enough to where it was hurting my ears. This is prior to, having the amplified hearing protection. So I just had what we called bone phones on, because I didn't, being up front, I was like, well, I'll lose some hearing. I don't really care about that. But the first sets of the amplified hearing protection, they couldn't really tell you where the sound was coming from. So I wasn't wearing them. So these 105, right? So AC 130 is a highly modified C-130 that has a howitzer sticking out of the side of it, and they can fly, a slow left turn or right turn, I forget, slow turn continuously, and they can just keep hammering. So the 105s are landing so close that it's hurting my ears. There's a very very exciting evening. We left there and walked until the sun was already coming up, and birds land. We're picking up, and there's just tracer fire like ripping up. I'm watching the tracer. I couldn't tell if the tracer was going behind the helo, the Dash 2 helo, or right through it. I couldn't tell. I remember praying at the time. And then the minigunners, just like the longest bursts of minigun, just wah wah, and they're just raking these compounds where all this tracer fire is coming out of. So yeah, definitely some cool. That was down in southern Afghanistan. Like that was pretty much, I think of all the stuff I've done there's only been one time where we didn't actually get into a fight down in that part of the country. They just, for whatever reason, they like to fight down there. So yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that sounds pretty hairy, especially to me sitting here in my air conditioned studio as you're talking about that. But real quick, because I do want to get into some other subjects, but I am just curious in those moments. Did you feel like you got into any type of a flow state? Because obviously you knew every night you went out, it could have been the last time that you went out. You guys knew that whenever you signed up, right? And, regardless of what some sensationalized books or movies might say, you guys aren't going on suicide missions for the most part. Like there's a plan for you getting back safely with all of your people and all of your equipment. But tell me where you would go in your brain and even in your soul. Like, were you relaxed in these moments? Were you frenetic but just under control, kind of like the meekness of a war horse? Like, kind of take me through whenever the bullets started flying, whenever you were landing on a hot LZ or something like that. What happened to you specifically? Not to the team, not to okay, yeah, we were still moving and we were still doing what we needed to do. What happened inside of Bill?
Hey, there's definitely times when I was scared. I mean, like, nervousness. If guys wrestle like that pre walking out on the mat, butterflies. Kind of
Yeah, right.
but amplified by a lot. So there's definitely times but generally they were like, as you're flying in, like that's, I would have some of that. And then once you're on the ground, it's like, hey, I've got work to do. Like you're just focusing on the task at hand. And that's the counsel that I give to guys as well. Like, hey, if you are involved in something violent, you need to just do the task at hand, right? Focus on the current mission, because you can't be in two separate places. You can't be thinking about family. You can't be thinking about these other things. You might think about your family before the mission, but when it's time to actually go and do work, like you can't think about any of those other things, because thinking about those other things will get you killed, right? I mean, that's one of the things I talk about now is persona, right? We all have different personas. If you're a cop, and right, you should be putting on, when you put your duty belt on, the hey, I am now the law persona should be coming on. If you do that and then partway through your shift you're thinking about the fight that you had with your wife, or an issue that you're having at home, like you might not get to go back to being the other persona of. And we don't discard, right? I don't mean this persona thing schizophrenically. I just mean like we all have things, right? Different identities.
Hmm.
And so it's important then when you're in a certain thing, like you don't, it can't detract, right? So Christ follower is my primary identity. Me thinking about the mission on hand does not detract from that. But
Hmm.
or husband is an identity that is higher to me than than being a SEAL was. But I can't allow, when I'm on a mission, I can't start thinking about husband things, because then I might not make it back to being a husband if I do that, right? So it's very important that in the moment you are just thinking about, hey, what do I need to do? If it's a like the waiting around is generally the worst. Just think about what are the steps? What am I have to do? Okay, I'm getting off the bird and I have to go left, or I'm getting off the bird and I'm going right, and then I'm expecting this to happen. I mean, shoot, uh, talking about the Jessica Lynch thing with I just had a student in class that was part of the air crew that was
Hmm.
there, like in at Talil Airfield there in Iraq. And I told him, I'm like, man, when I landed on that, I think I was on the second little bird going in there. I'm like, I fully expected, as we ran up to the hospital, to like the Saddam Fedayeen would have sandbag positions, and that they'd start machine gunning us, and that we'd just be trying to throw grenades in there. Like that was my expectation. So all I was thinking of, like, the whole time in is like, okay, I better, like, we're gonna land. I need to move up to here, and then go. And now it ended up not being nearly, I mean, it was amazing, but it wasn't nearly as sporty as, like, it was as it was supposed to
Right.
be. But yeah, just thinking about, right, you got to keep those emotions in check, right? I mean, it's not, being courageous is not the absence of fear. It's being able to control your fear and work through it, right? Everyone's going to be, the people that say they're not scared, they're either lying or they're truly crazy, right? Almost
Right.
everyone is scared when stuff is going on. What you want to do is train to the level to where you don't have to think about it anymore. It becomes that unconscious competence level of, yeah, okay, I've thought about this enough. Okay, I'm going to get off the bird and I'm going to step off, and I'm going to just start running and then go and do.
Yeah, and I think I've heard that same exact thing from guys that I know that are in the Spec Ops community. Every single one of them said they're scared. Not a single one of them has pretended like they weren't scared whenever they were, coming up to a mission or something like that. And you mentioned jiu-jitsu earlier. For a lot of guys, the closest we'll get to that might be a jiu-jitsu tournament or a wrestling tournament or something like that. Because I know, because I just got my purple belt, so I got some way harder competitions coming my way here very soon.
Yeah.
But that's just the thing, is I'm a mess before the match starts, and then while the match is going on, I can't tell you exactly what I'm thinking because I'm not really thinking, I'm flowing, not like in flow state exactly, but it's like, okay, this is what I'm seeing from my opponent. So these are the takedowns that I feel like are available to me. Here are the positions that I feel like I can get into, and you're just kind of breaking it all down. And it's not until you're driving home from the tournament where you're like, okay, I can kind of start to unpack this a little bit, because beforehand you're just like, man, it's really, really cold in this gym. Man, I really hope I don't get tapped out in front of my wife. Man, I really hope my coaches don't look at me, in disgust after this. And you're worried about all these things, but then whenever the referee says go and you slap bump, you just kind of have to get after it from then. But I think we need to go ahead and fast forward.
Congrats on your purple belt, by the way.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. I didn't slide that in there for the congrats, but I do appreciate it because,
it's a big deal for anyone that doesn't roll purple belt's a big deal. I mean, that's 5 to 8 years. That's a good. Yeah.
When you just stay on the journey, that's the thing for a lot of guys. Like I know a lot of guys in my life that have gotten their purple belt and then have just kind of stayed there and had their purple belt for a long time. And, these are still bad dudes, but, I'm going to stay on the journey and I'm going to keep working my way up. It's not about the belt color. It's about the, progression you make as a man inside a sport that challenges you to be better and resilient all the time.
One more jiu-jitsu thing before we move on. I'm actually super excited. My jiu-jitsu teacher is coming out. We have we're calling the Amtac training center at our place. And he's coming out for we're just doing a straight jiu-jitsu and pistols course. So I'm super excited that now my kids, I teach locally here to our kids with our father-son ministry program. But yeah, I'm super excited. Gustavo Machado from Virginia Beach. So really excited. He's coming out. I haven't seen him in years now. So it's going to be super cool to have him out here and get to roll.
Dude, that's going to be amazing. But here's the thing. I'm just going to blow up the question I was going to ask again, because you made me think of something else with jiu-jitsu. So one thing that I've been curious about, for me specifically, there are certain positions that I'm more comfortable in because I come from a wrestling background. So obviously I don't like bottom position as much as I like top position. I'd rather apply pressure as opposed to trying to redirect pressure and all those different things. But coming from what you're going to do, and we'll get into Amtac here in a second as well, obviously I'm assuming a lot of your jiu-jitsu game is predicated on what I could actually use in real life to end a fight or to separate myself from danger. Because there are a lot of things in kind of modern sport jiu-jitsu, Bill, that are not terribly conducive to winning a street fight or terribly conducive to, protecting your family or all that. Some of you're not going to berimbolo on asphalt. Right. That's just not something that's probably going to be your best bet. But I feel like for me, I'm not good enough at jiu-jitsu and I'm not experienced enough to tell my teachers or my professors what to teach or to suggest to somebody, hey, you don't need to train that. It's not real life. But for me, everything that I do, and even when I'm rolling, I'm thinking, what if this were real? And what if this was bigger than rolling at class, bigger than a competition? What if this was my life on the line? Would I be, jumping for a triangle, flying triangle? Would I be, trying to yank a guy down and try to do this perfect, judo trip to end up in top position? Kind of walk me through that. What's your overall philosophy, having trained in this sport for 2 decades now?
Yeah. So first off, I love doing jiu-jitsu, but it's not the most important thing. When we talk about the hierarchy of protecting yourself and your family, awareness is number one. Safety with your firearms is going to be number two. Making sure that when you pull the gun out, it goes bang. That would be number three, right? I've watched that a ton of times. Guys pull the gun out, it goes click. And then the next one would be clean draw stroke from concealment, combative weapons retention shooting, and then other strong hand only blade deployment and targeting. After we have those things down, because those are the biggest return on investment, right? Think about, I can take a fairly weak woman and in about 5 minutes show her how to safely load the pistol and point at the door, I don't want to have to come through that door after 5 minutes of training. You can't do that with jiu-jitsu, right? With a little bit more, if she uses surprise, that same girl can now hold a blade. And now if you don't realize, if you don't realize that, she's going, oh, no, please, right? Concealing the blade here and going, no, please, please, right? And now you lay hands on her and, right, again, chance for her to win. The jiu-jitsu piece is super important. We need to be able to do that because we can win with a lower level of violence if we can control people. Also allows us to stay on our feet, which is super important in dealing with multiple targets, right? Fighting multiple people at a time. So specifically with jiu-jitsu, number one, always dominate top position. I've been teaching our local kids for about 7.5 years now. I tell them, please do not shame me by pulling guard. Like we are going to, we start in guard all the time, but I'm like, you will never, ever pull guard. Like, don't shame me. And I'm serious. Like, don't do that because it's not because I don't come at it from a sport jiu-jitsu perspective. So that would be number one. Number two, if you're a big guy, do big guy moves. I honestly think it's disrespectful to just kind of like, if I'm a big guy, of course I'm going to use my strength and my size. Why would I not do that? I mean, I'm not saying like on a 10-year-old, but like why would that's my game. I do big guy moves. My teacher, who was smaller than me, like crushes me still, and I'm like, the last time we rolled, he taps me out and I'm like, Guga, I'm bigger and stronger than you. And he goes, yes, but I taught you everything you know. He's just smiling at me. Good morning, my son.
Hey, Dad.
You need to go back upstairs, okay?
Hey, buddy.
Give me a hug first. You can wave at the camera. All right, good.
Hey, buddy.
I had to wave and
have a good morning.
Because that's the picture.
So being able to do big guy moves, the whole flow roll, let's keep it playful, bro. Like my head wants to explode when I hear guys say that. To me, it's disrespectful. Like if we're like, I can feed you stuff and like, okay, I'm just like, this training is for you. I'm going to give you my arms. I'm going to give you my neck. Like I've got, I'll resist for a second to make sure that you do a counter and then I'll let you get it. Like I can do that, but it's not competitive. It's just, I'm feeding you and then you're going to feed me and do the same thing. Like I'm good with doing that. But this whole, hey, we're just going to go 50%. No, because we're competitive.
If someone's not injured at that moment, that's probably not the best use of either of your time.
Yes. Like because maybe then I think you're going 51%. And then I have to apply 52. So let's just dispense with that and go, hey, you know what? So when I teach our kids, before we roll, I say, all right, what are our rules? Number one, don't hurt your training partner. Why? Because then you can't keep training if you hurt your training partner. What's rule number two? Don't be a spaz, right? I got to say that for myself. I know that I roll hard. There's been times when I was younger where like I not so much in jiu-jitsu, but in just general like work stuff, like I did go too hard. From a misplaced sense of urgency or of trying to go hard in areas where I didn't need to. Other technical things, knee on belly, hugely underappreciated in jiu-jitsu because if you think about, I know that if a guy is as good as me, I can probably hold knee on belly maybe for a short period of time. If he's better than me, I probably can't even hold knee on belly. Right. He's gonna be able to get out of it because it's not as stable. But who are we actually fighting? Generally, people that don't know jiu-jitsu. Knee on belly is the position because I can access either tool, right? I can do another really important concept. Don't look at me concept. Push on their face, put specifically on their eyes. Push their head offline. Not dig your hands into their eyes, but put your hand across their ocular cavity and push on them. Because what does everyone do when you do that? They reach up. They don't like that. They try and strip it off. Yeah. If you're stripping your hand off of my face, you're not pulling a tool out because I can pull a tool out with one hand, right? I can draw with either hand. So if I'm doing that, you're not drawing, which again goes back to that, what we call logical order of thought in regards to like, I'm looking at all this from I'm fighting for real. Another thing with mount being, or with knee on belly being such a great position, is if I have knee on belly on you and I smash you a few times and now your buddies show up, I can disengage. I have
Right.
mount on you, I smash you a few times. Now your buddies show up. You have a vote in the matter. Or, I mean, you still have a vote in the matter even on from knee on belly, but it is way easier for you just to grab onto me and go, well, all I have to do is hold you here another 10 seconds. And then my buddy hits you in the head with his brick. Right. So being knee on belly is huge. Next, jiu-jitsu specific piece, Kimura. Like I came up with arm bars are king. Like, all right, we're going to start class with 50 arm bars each side from guard. Like, and I'll still arm bar guys because I'm teaching them jiu-jitsu, and like you have to know how to do arm bars and you have to be able to escape from arm bars. But tactically, Kimuras are so much better because I can do Kimura from top position. I can do Kimura from all different positions, but really where I want to be doing Kimura from is I can do it from that knee on belly. I can control his hand. I can rip him up. Ripped up shoulders are harder for the guy to continue fighting from than popped elbows are. And it keeps me in a dominant position. And also it lines things up for cuffing people as well. If I did need to, cuff the person afterwards, it is easier to do from that position of Kimura, especially Kimura from the top, than it's going to be from me pulling a triangle on the guy or arm barring the guy or anything else like that. Another really important one, every time I teach our kids, anytime you change positions, side control, situational awareness scan, knee on belly, situational awareness scan. Like each time you change position, that should be the first thing you do is situational awareness scan, because we should always approach it as if, fair fights, they only happen with your, drunk brother-in-law, right? They don't, right. Or like a very specific, maybe you're a firefighter and it's at the firehouse and like there's a Christmas party, like, and there's a guy that you just, like that's the only time there's a fair fight. The rest of the time we have to assume that there's going to be more than one person attacking you and there are going to be weapons involved. Therefore, situational awareness scan, head on a swivel. Like that's another thing. When as I'm rolling with guys now, it's no longer this focus on just on them. It's okay. I can blind people grapple and grapple well, right? So if they can grapple well blind, as I'm working locks, like I'm trying to look around and take in the environment around me, because you could be the best jiu-jitsu guy on the planet and you're head down and now you get the brick to the back of the head. Not a whole lot of skill involved in getting smashed in the head with a brick.
No. So well, you're talking about a lot of things that I think are very important in terms of jiu-jitsu, is thinking about what you're training for. Because I know guys that are world champions and that is what they're training for. But obviously world championship level jiu-jitsu is going to translate well in the streets, but there may be some holes here or there. But the same thing is true. I know that some people have advocated for, every now and then at your gym, you should roll where guys are wearing 16-ounce boxing gloves, but only one of the guys. So a guy starts mounted in you, he's got 16-ounce boxing gloves on. And so your little like frame on their hip, and here, let me take my time and work this hip out, and then I'll switch and then take my time. Well, if the guy on top of you is throwing even 50% punches, that plan goes out the window pretty quick. And so I think that that's a good thing to remind everybody about with jiu-jitsu. And I mean, we could literally spend the rest of the day talking about jiu-jitsu and different things.
Talk for hours about that.
But I do need to get to a couple more things before we get you out of here so you can go hang out with your son. Obviously, you decided to get out of the military. You did 20 years in the United States Navy as a SEAL, but you decided that was it for you. You weren't going to go any further than your 20 years. Then you decided that you were going to start your own, self-defense training company. And so firearms and blades and different things. And that's Amtac shooting. Yes. And so I guess the thing that why? Like, why go this route? Like, why teach civilians like me and guys like me and gals that are kind of wired like that, teaching them the stuff that our tax dollars paid you to learn while you were in the Navy? Why not go do something else entirely? Like some guys get out and they're like, I'm going to go sell insurance. Like I'm going to try to start a watch company, or like they're doing something completely different. So why go that route? Why was that the next step?
I mean, it's something I've always enjoyed. I mean, and there's a lot of stuff that I learned at work, but there's a lot of, for years and years, the work was not paying for my jiu-jitsu. Like a lot later on, we got it figured out and they paid for jiu-jitsu. But for years and years, that was all like I was taking my own time to go and do jiu-jitsu training or go train with SIOC or show up early and shoot. Like that was stuff that I looked at and I'm like, hey, this is like, I want to be that guy. Like I want to be good at this. I don't want to be, just good. And, I want to be really good at it. And so it's with anything, like if you want to be really good at it, you actually have to do it a lot and you have to do it on your own time. So it was something that I already enjoyed doing. The last kind of how I got to Amtac shooting, the last 2 years I was active duty, I ran our K9 program, and I had a bunch of guys that worked for me that weren't SEALs. They were Navy Master at Arms. Those guys have a significantly less intensive firearms and tactical training than the frogmen do. So with these guys, I started making them go to the range with me at least once a week. I started doing CQB with the guys, and then we'd go on the road, and the different law enforcement groups would host us, and so I've got my guys on the line teaching them, and as a thank you, I'd always throw in one or two cops that were standing around like safety guy, they're RSOs for their range, and they're just hanging out. And I'm like, hey, come on up, man, like get on the line, do some shooting with us. And those guys would come up to me afterwards and they'd go, man, that was amazing. Like you actually talked about and demoed, and I'm like, what? Doesn't everyone teach that way? And they're like, no. So I was encouraged. So, and then I had a bunch of retired cops that worked for me at the time, and they really encouraged me. They're like, hey, you could crush this if you wanted to go down this path. And so I started going down this path and didn't really know where I was going to, was I going to teach mostly mill guys, mostly cops, civilian, like really didn't know. And had another good friend of mine, Kyle DeFore. If you ever get a chance to definitely try and train with Kyle, he's one of the top guys in the industry right now. But I asked him, and he gave me some great counsel. I got to help teach a class for him, and man, I've just been so blessed with solid students. Like, so my baseline student is a civilian that is just serious about protecting themselves and their family. The guys can shoot. Like when my former teammates ask me about some of my students, I'll be like, yeah, they'll outrun you with their pistol. Like a lot of my guys will outrun former teammates with pistols, not with carbines, but with pistols, just because they're into it. Like that's what they do. And so I appreciate guys that want to learn. So with the civilians, like you get a guy that had to buy his own pistol, had to buy his own ammo, had to buy his own holster, like had to take time off from work to come train, like all had to, take time away from his family to come train. Like, so those guys they're really motivated, to do the training. And I like when guys want to learn, like those are the guys that I want to teach. So I've really enjoyed that. I've enjoyed the kind of camaraderie that more than half the places where I go and teach, I stay with friends. Like they pick me up at the airport and I'm hanging out with friends. So it's almost like little mini reunions every time I go someplace. The culture is guys aren't drinking. Overwhelmingly, guys aren't drinking. Like, and I do try and invite guys out. Hey, let's go out to eat dinner at, after day one, just because relationships are important, and it's cool just to hang out with guys and foster not just me getting to know these guys, but the guys getting to know each other as well. Overwhelmingly, guys aren't consuming any alcohol, or if they are, it's like they're having one beverage. So it's just like this very like, hey, if I have to be gone from my family, like that's a good, like those are good people to be hanging out with. And then really most importantly, I get to share the gospel now with them. Like as part of mindset, I do a mindset talk anytime I do a 2-day class. There's a mindset talk, and we talk about a lot of things that will help you survive a violent confrontation. But then we finish with, hey, you might do everything right and you might die. And so therefore, like we can't talk about readiness without talking about readiness for death and being right with God, and how, hey, the only way that you're right with God is through his son, Jesus. And so it's really, it's awesome that, and I did not, like, I've grown in my, boldness. Like my initial mindset talks were like, they would end with like one sentence of be right with God. And now it's like a little mini sermon. Like I'll talk about Peter, and, that's one of the really, just looking at the life of Peter and how he goes from kind of on again, off again faith, to when it's time for him to die, right? Church tradition tells us this, not the Bible, but he encourages his wife first. She's crucified, and then it's his turn, and he goes upside down, like, not worthy to die the same way my Savior died. And it's like, what makes a guy like that go from, oh yeah, I'll fight for you and die for you and then run away, or I'll fight for you and die for you and then deny him. And like, the only answer to that is the resurrection. Peter saw the resurrection. And then his life was changed after that. And so it's a huge privilege to be able to, I get to teach guys how to shoot and fight, and, hopefully foster some camaraderie and some friendships there. But then most importantly, I also get to share the gospel with guys.
It's an incredible thing. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend. You were actually in my neck of the woods here recently, but timing didn't quite work out with the newborn. But I got a pin in that, because we will make sure that I'm out there in the future. But I read enough reviews and have talked to enough people that have gone to your events, and it's a different level of training than what a lot of people will experience. And there are those other elements that you do bring in. So guys, in the show notes, there will be a link to your website so you can see whenever you have different classes coming up and everything else. But I want to end today with something that I heard you talk about in another podcast that I didn't know that you were actually dealing with. And my understanding is you're still trying to figure out exactly what to do with it. And it's something that I'm becoming more and more obsessed with, because I just had my second son, and that's rites of passage. And so teaching young men, ushering them into manhood. And there are different organizations that have tried to do things like this, and maybe it just didn't work out well. I know that there's kind of a groundswell with fathers that, they know their church isn't going to teach their young boy to be a man. And so they're taking more of a forward approach to how those things are happening. And that's something that you're doing. So you're trying to figure out, how can we make sure that these young men understand what it means to be a man, not just, checking boxes, but also the things that are required of them and the things that are expected of them and the responsibilities that they will have as they grow older. So talk to me a little bit about kind of why that's so important to you and some of the things you're trying to do with it.
So we have been doing a program now for about seven plus years now. It's called Father-Son Ministry. I'm trying to pull up my my notes on that, just because it kind of will give a clear and concise mission statement for it. Here we go. So we started doing this. So, I retired. We came out here. I'd kind of had this on my heart that, like, I want to do something for, mostly I was thinking for the boys at the time. Like, I want them to grow up and know and love Jesus. That is the most important thing. But also I want them to be capable men. Right. And in part, I got this from, if any of you guys are familiar with Colonel Cooper, right? He's one of the, hardcore old school dude. He kind of one of the founders of competitive, IPSC shooting. Started Gunsight out in Arizona, and he used to have on the back page of Guns and Ammo, Cooper's Corner, these ramblings. Some of them good, some of them less good. But one of them was, hey, what should a young man know when he leaves? And the whole, shoot, speak the truth, ride and shoot hard. So he had, and then he had a list of stuff. So I started looking at, what do I want my boys to know? Like, what's important to me that they know? And number one, it is that they become committed followers of Christ. But then after that, I want them to be capable. I want them to be able to, to protect themselves and their families. And then I want them to know a lot about a lot of different things. So for Father-Son Ministry, as we wrote it down, the purpose to glorify God by raising our sons to know Jesus and be obedient to him. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Then number 2 was to encourage fathers with their walk with the Lord. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another. That point, man, I thought it was going to be mostly for the kids, and I think it's every bit for the men as well. Like, it's really morphed into like this Bible study for the men and the boys now as part of it. Number 3, to teach our boys to be men, to take care of their families that are well-rounded. Number 4, to train fathers to be examples for their sons. And number 5, to create a community of godly men to go through life together. So core skills, developing a relationship with Christ. This must be the foundation upon which we live our lives. Number 2, fighting. As men, we have a duty to protect our families and to stand up for the fatherless. Knowing how to shoot and fight allows you to be God's instrument for protecting those around you. And number 3, life skills. Men should know a lot about a wide variety of topics. See the list below. So the list: fitness, right? Fatigue makes cowards of us all. That's Vince Lombardi quote right there, which is phenomenal, and it's so true, right? You the guy that's like hardcore, when he gets tired, like makes cowards of us all. Fighting, base art, jiu-jitsu, mindset, mostly from SIOC, and then incorporating Thai boxing, Western boxing, wrestling. Shooting, primitive skills, how to make shelters, shelter, water, fire, food, animal husbandry, preserving food, understanding engines, vehicle repair, like just changing your oil, getting vehicles unstuck, basic plumbing, basic electrical, like all these things I was super deficient on. Like I didn't know how to do most of these things when I left home at 17, but I want my boys to be better than me. So, and then kind of as a verse for the whole program, Deuteronomy 31:6, be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. So that's just been a really cool program. We're actually kind of praying about maybe making it a national level program to try and be able to encourage guys. We've already had a couple other. We've got a New Hampshire branch that is one of my good
awesome.
friends is doing a branch there. We've had Washington and we had Atlanta going for a while as well. But so we're kind of praying through what would it look like to do this as a national organization, kind of a resource for men that want to do something like this in their own backyards. And we do it through our church. So we are under the authority of our church as we do this. We meet at our local church. We've got wrestling mats. That's been a huge blessing. It's also like just personal development. When we started this, I remember talking to the old pastor and I'm like, hey, I'm good for the Bible lesson, like maybe every other month, but it's a lot, it was because it took me hours to prep for a 20-minute Bible lesson. And now it's like, man, if I'm in town, I'm generally the guy doing it. And it does not take me 2 hours or 3 hours to prep for it anymore. So it's, getting reps in, preparing little mini sermons has been huge.
I think it's an important thing just for fathers to hear the extent to which you've gone into planning for this, because a lot of guys try to do this haphazardly, every now and then, do as I say, not as I do, or hey, just kind of watch me and those different things. But there are a lot of great resources out there. I know that you're going to continue to grow the stuff that you're doing. I've talked to John Tyson before, the Intentional Father. They're going to be putting out an entire, plethora of resources for folks. But I think that there's a lot of things that you can build out that is going to be optimal for you and your family and the timing of your family. Because obviously, if you have one son, you can put 18 years worth of focus into that one kid becoming a man. But if you have multiple sons like me and a lot of our listeners, it's going to go further out from there. But hey, we're right at 2 hours.
If I can add one more thing, because I just wanted to touch on it. You mentioned it, like rites of passage type things. I think those can be really good, but I think it has to be an all and approach. It cannot just be a rites of passage. It's some of the stuff that I've read where guys are like kind of tracking on the same line. Like, they do like one big thing for them, as their teenage years, or maybe it's even multiple things. I think the guys that are doing multiple things, like, hey, at 10, we're doing something, and at 13 and at 15, like, I think that's more online. But I think really you cannot get away from the day in and out, just logging through. Every week we go and you're going to do hard stuff together with other boys, right? I love it. I've had boys crying. Just rolling so hard that they're crying afterwards. We've done boxing stuff where they're crying, they're scared getting in there. But that's so good for young men. It's good for young men to lose sometimes, right? It's good. Like we need to, and we're doing it with their fathers there, with their peers, their friends are there, right? So they get that, and then they're getting the gospel every single weekday when we meet to do this. Like we're sharing the gospel with them. I'm encouraging some of the, from time to time, I'll ask one of the older boys, hey, share what does the gospel mean to you? Like if I say, hey, give me Like, tell me about this whole gospel business. Like, where's the hope that you have? So now that we're doing leadership, we're encouraging them in their faith. So like, you cannot get, so I think it is good to have initiation type things where maybe, I've thought about as they get older, like, hey, you have to go into the woods, like by yourself for a couple days and like, traverse a distance, like I think there's some stuff like that that's really good, but you can't just do that. There has to be that day in, day out, where the meat and potatoes of it is what they're getting on a weekly basis. And then you have these culminating events that they can look back on and go, oh, wow, that was really cool. I did that. But the only reason they were able to succeed on that is because they have those years of, oh yeah, it's raining or snowing. It doesn't matter. We're still going out and we're hiking, or we're still going to camp out, or, we're going to go sleep in the snow or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think it's very good to not realize that you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. And it's the difference between taking your kid to a church camp and they have the church camp experience versus discipling a child.
Yes,
like those are
100%.
not the same thing.
Yes.
And so like you've got this high coming out of church camp, but then Monday rolls around and you got to go to class or you got to go to work. Yep. It's like, okay, you can't just depend on those types of things. But Bill, we've gone everywhere in this conversation. Again, yes, I think you would just absolutely light up with laughter if you saw my notes versus what we actually ended up talking about. But I think it warranted a much better conversation that we were able to flow that way. But as for now, I'm sure we'll do this again at some point down the road. But as for now, that is all for me. Is there anything else you want to get off your chest?
No, thanks for having me on. Great being here. Good conversation.
All right, Bill Rapier, thank you for coming on Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast.
Thank you.
There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed my time with Bill Rapier. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So the links I've got for you today is the Amtac shooting website, so you can check out what classes are going to be potentially coming to your area. Also, we didn't get to spend a lot of time talking about this, but Amtac blades, he makes his own, fixed blades and different things like that. They're just absolutely incredible knives. So I've got that website here, and also a link to the Amtac shooting Instagram. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to this podcast. We do appreciate it. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band August Burns Red for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Cutting the Ties, which is off their 10th anniversary re-recording of their album Leveler. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.